Two Wood for a Wheat is a board game podcast. We review and criticize board games, diving deep into the strategies and mechanisms that make them great or make them forgettable.
Welcome to Two Wood for a Wheat. I'm Tony Faber.
I'm Pat Flannery. On today's episode, we are previewing Essen 2023, doing a top 10 games of what we're most excited about in this upcoming October session, followed by many, many more games that we are curious about and that we're going to keep our eyes on.
How are you, Pat?
You know, I'm solid. I worked like 70 hours this week. It was very busy. I'm very tired.
Well, now you can relax into the deep, warm, dark embrace of board games.
That's the thing. I somehow found time to look through several hundred, if not 1,000 titles and, you know, divulge information about 70 games and actually look through about half that and get a sense of things of what I'm anticipated for at 2023 Essen and what the future year of board games will look like as a result. So I'm excited to divulge that information with you, Tony, and with our listeners.
I am too. I'm very excited about this. And I was just telling you off the air, you know, we have some rules for how we're going to do this for our anticipated Essen games, right? Mm-hmm. We don't just want to say the same things you've heard on episodes before. So we're not putting on games that were on our anticipated 2023 games list.
Nor on our 2022 Essen list, which there were several
exactly.
repeats, yeah.
Yeah, there's some things that carried over because they haven't come out yet. And we don't like to reward tardiness here on Two Wood for a Wheat. Even so, at the beginning of the year, you don't know most of the games that are coming out at Essen, so that's not a big deal. We did say that we would allow games that we had seen or played that came out at Gen Con, but I found myself, for the most part, with one exception, not putting those games on my list because I wasn't anticipating them enough or I'd already played them and it didn't just feel right to say I was now anticipating them. To give the most extreme example, Forest Shuffle, a game we reviewed, is technically the English version is coming out at Essen, but I'm not going to put that on my anticipated games list, even though I love it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and games that came out previously or we discussed previously from other lists like Pioneer Rails and, you know, Wild Tiled West. Okay, fine. Those are actually releasing around this time now, but, you know, they've already appeared, so they're not going to make it. But other games that we did have chances to play, which we'll talk about in a bit, that are technically releasing at Essen. It's going to be fun to jazz up some of those examples. And but Tony, there's a lot of stuff here that I want to get into, especially on my honorable mentions that I was like, that's surprising. I'm going to take a risk on that. But should we discuss how we formulated our list here? This long, bedraggled intro to our eventual anticipated list, as we often do.
Yes. Well, first of all, huge kudos to Board Game Geek and Eric Martin for putting together the Essen preview list of games releasing there, without which any sort of list would be incomplete because they are the encyclopedia of over 1,000 games which are releasing at Essen. So I start there. I start by going through those games. I look at the ones that are most popular first, but I eventually get to almost everything there. And then I look at other people's anticipated games lists and even previews of games that are on these lists so I can see a little bit about how they play as well. Videos, blogs, YouTube, you name it. I go then dive deeper if I'm not sure about a game or a game looks intriguing, but there isn't much information about it on the BGG list. So as I was saying to you before, I spent about 6 hours yesterday just plowing through the BGG list and then videos and blogs and all kinds of different stuff. And eventually, the last one or two, I wasn't satisfied with my last one. It wasn't a game that I was really that excited about. So I spent another hour until I found a hidden gem. And I'm excited because you'll recognize most of the games, I think, that I'm going to say, Pat. But there's two or three that will raise your eyebrows, I think.
Good. Okay. Similar to you, I went through Eric Martin's massive list of Essen releases and Essen demos. I tried to avoid expansions. I did allow re-implementations this time around. I also attempted to avoid games that we'd already discussed. And I looked through that list once, going through all 1,000 plus titles, taking a glance at them. And then I went through it several more times by publisher as well as by designer to assess based off of my favorite publishers and designers who I looked forward to and what was coming out. And then I went through the several lists of most anticipated games by others. other reviewers to get a sense of what I may have missed, as well as some lists from previous years, 2022, what people were saying they thought would be at Essen, and double checking that, oh, that actually is at Essen. I want to see what that is. That looks interesting. So I filled out my list to about 60 games that I found most interesting, and from there, I divided that into about half, into a short list of 28 games, and plucked out 10 that I was really interested in, plus another 10 to 18 that I think are quite interesting or odd, and I want to keep track of as they get released to see how they do and assess them as they go. So that's where I'm at.
Excellent. Well, it's funny because usually we have a lot of preamble about our lives and other games we've played, and it seems like we're both just excited to dive right into the Essen games.
Let's get into it.
Let's just do that.
Great. You want to start us off?
Yeah, we'll start with some honorable mentions, and so this does not take up half the episode. I'll try to just.
Should we do honorable mentions at the last, so we don't despoil what's on our list?
Oh, you're right. We should do honorable mentions last.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm forgetting how this all works.
It's been a several months since the last one. So.
Okay, so my number 10 game is Tucana Builders by Christian Amundsen Ostby. I'm going to butcher these names, of course. Eilif Svensson, and published by A.R.T. Games. These are two designers who've teamed up on really well-known Euro games such as, Santa Maria, The Magnificent, and most recently Revive, which we reviewed. And they also, most relevantly, designed the roll and write game Trails of Tucana, upon which this game is based. And this kind of takes the base concept of being a flip and write navigational game across jungle terrain and makes it actually a game where you're placing hexes on your private player board rather than drawing lines. Instead of drawing a line the way you want to draw it, the tile you draw has a certain form of paths that, perhaps just go straight or loop around to the other hexes, and you have to place it on the flipped type of terrain that you have. So like Trails of Tucana, it looks like a game where you have to sort of push your luck and decide whether, well, this will kind of work, but I'll be cutting off this one area, but it'll get my main goal done, or put it somewhere else and hope that the perfect tile shows up, which will allow you to get both things done. And I love Trails of Tucana, even though it's a very frustrating roll and write game, and I love the push your luck elements and the addictive quality of it. And I suspect this is going to be really good. It reminded me a little of Karuba and how you're building those paths out by Rudiger Dorn. And this looks like it might be even better because I tend to like tile placement better than roll and writes. But the only thing that keeps it down at number 10 on this list and keeps my enthusiasm slightly muted is that I'm just wondering if it's a little too similar to Trails of Tucana to make it, worth owning both. I'll probably buy it when it comes here, although A.R.T. Games are kind of slow to get to the U.S. sometimes, but looks like it's fun, small box, spatial puzzle of the kind I really enjoy. And if you don't have Trails of Tucana, then I really would recommend keeping an eye out for Tucana Builders.
Very cool. I never played Trails of Tucana, so I saw this, and I put it at the bottom because I didn't have any experience with the original. So,
what does it mean you put it at the bottom?
I have a list of about 60 games that I looked at, but it's at the bottom of that list because I don't have familiarity with the original source. But I know the designers, so I was still interested. So
yeah.
My number 10 is by a familiar designer. It's Aldebaran Duel by Vladimir Suhi. Aldebaran, not to be confused with Alderan. And this is Suhi's game that self-admittedly is outside of his usual oeuvre, which is why it's not published by Delicious Games. Rather, it's published by Dino Toys SRO. It's a little lighter than his normal competitive tricksy Euros with the dual conjoined elements. Rather, Aldebaran Duel is about building out a space fleet to colonize planets, where you're using merchant and diplomatic and battleships. You're going to obtain cards that are going to represent not just these items of ships and planets, but also resources. And it is a game where you have to decide how you want to use that cards. Do you utilize them as resources, or do you utilize them for what is inherently on them? And planet building seems like one of the game's key mechanisms. Looks like it is an interesting way of building out planets where you're building out colored quadrants, and building out colored quadrants of that planet will get you affiliated resources. And I think that this game that's going to utilize cards as raw resources is going to put in an inherently delicious tension of using a card for its resource value versus using it for what's on the card. I generally love that in games. I have enjoyed more interesting, less attacky dueling games. And I think I trust Suhi to do a good job with an engine building dueler with multi-use cards. I'm excited for this one. That's Aldebaran Duel by Vladimir Suhi.
I completely missed this one, and maybe it was because my mind instantly deletes anything where I see XYZ Duel from my head, so it just flashed right by me.
That's why I'm here for the Aldebaran and Splendor duels of the world.
Excellent. Well, my number 9 is a little bit perhaps under the radar, although it is from a major publisher, Yellow, but it's from a first-time designer, Remy Mathieu, and the game is Ancient Knowledge. This is a tableau-building card game that's supposed to be played over 30 to 60 minutes, and in this game, you are putting out cards into your current technology area, and they slowly roll off as turns go by and go into the sort of the past pile. And things can happen, and you score cards that are in your past pile, but there's also knowledge that gets put on those cards, and if you don't take actions to retrieve the knowledge, lost knowledge costs you victory points at the end of this game. To be honest with you, part of my attraction to this game is it looks like it has some things in common with Forest Shuffle. It looks like a combo-licious tableau-building game that takes a reasonably short length of time to play, but has a lot of little interesting card interactions that work with each other. And you might just totally ignore that ancient knowledge points you lost because you've built a card that says I gain 10 points if I've lost at least 15 knowledge. So that negates 2/3 of it, right? All these different things I looked at some of the cards and it seemed very impressive. I didn't love the art style in the game, which maybe held it down a little bit for me, but this one looks very clever. And I've seen some good press from people who've played it. I definitely want to check it out.
I had this game as a tab open not 10 minutes ago, and I closed it because I didn't find the points of interest that you did, so I'm glad you took a closer look. That sounds interesting. My number 9 is a game called Celtae by Orlando Sa, and published by Pythagoras. Celtae is a worker-swapping rondel game where you'll be swapping workers with other workers on a rondel, and where you'll take actions to draw cards and build buildings, attack Romans, or recruit workers. And those actions will all be improved by playing a specific type of worker, farmers, builders, soldiers, and druids. A soldier will upgrade an attack action. A builder will upgrade a builder action and make it more powerful. And that sounds similar to, Tabannusi's and I think some of the key games, worker color matching, paired with worker swapping, which is a clever mechanism and one that I would like to explore. Plus, the artwork is beautiful. You've got this a Celtic individual on the front cover with this flaming red hair, splayed across a dark background. It's very striking. I'm excited to give Celtae a chance.
Yeah, I took a look at this one, and almost as an honorable mention. I didn't see enough that made it stand out from other Euro games, but it could be great, and I'd be happy to play it with you sometime. So my number 8 game, I'm going to guess this is not on your list, but we'll see, is Apiary from first-time designer again, Connie Vogelman and Stonemaier Games. This is the big Stonemaier game release of the fall, and this is a game about bees in space.
Bees in space!
Yes, so your bees have a colony ship, and they're exploring the world, and they're building out their colony ship. I like that this looks like to be, for Stonemaier Games, a return to more standard mechanisms, and I tend to like their games that have more standard mechanisms. And I guess what I mean by that is it's a worker placement game, right? And it's got worker bumping, and that I can like, and it has this effect that if you can go where somebody else's worker is, but you send them back, but you improve their worker when you do so they get something from it, right? Which, Stonemaier Games are all about making you feel good, and that feels better than you having to pay extra to go to that space, right? It also has some unique things that looked interesting to me, like there's a neutral queen of the bees that roams the board, and all the players can control it and get her favor and use her to fulfill various goals. So that looked a little bit new. I liked the building out of your spaceship, and of course, because it's a Stonemaier game, there are all kinds of asymmetrical faction powers. So there's like 20 asymmetrical bee factions, and then there's 20 asymmetrical starting tiles. Are all of these going to be balanced? Based on past Stonemaier experience, almost certainly not. But it still will be fun to explore, I suspect. And the art style, the art is probably as good as you would expect from a Stonemaier game. It's by Kwanchai Moria and looks pretty spectacular. So I'm not thinking this is going to be the greatest game ever made, but I suspect Apiary will be quite enjoyable.
I have no comment on Apiary at this point.
Maybe it will appear on your list. We shall see.
We shall see. My number 8 is a game called Sankore, or Sankore, The Pride of Mansa Musa. And this is going to be by Mandela Fernandez Grandin and Fabio Lopiano, and published by Osprey Games. Sankore is pretty. It's more Ian O'Toole. And it's Fabio Lopiano, whose games have admittedly been pretty hit or miss for me, but they've always been interesting. And this looks like Merv's younger brother in both the artwork and design pedigree respect, which I was not huge on Merv. I didn't like the central mechanism of it that much, but the key difference between this and Merv for me are the fact that there are several mini-games. It looks very Newton-y. Where each track of knowledge in this West Mali University is actually its own minigame. Astronomy is a point-to-point movement map a la Newton. Theology and law look like area majority and contracts. Mathematics looks like you're placing walls on an XY grid of bonuses. There is a lot going on here. Action points, area majority, influence, contracts, endgame bonuses, point-to-point movement. It sounds like a lot of traditional Euro-y stuff, but it's got me intrigued because it seems to be in the same structure of a Teotihuacan or a Tekhenu. It almost has a board and dice style multi-minigame with a central mechanism feel, and I want to give this one a shot. That is Sankore, The Pride of Mansa Musa.
Completely missed this one, so it's good you're there to catch the ball.
That's why there's two of us.
My number 7 is a game called Rats of Wistar. I won't lie, I was attracted to this game because it was co-designed by Simone Luciani as well as Danilo Sabia and published by Cranio Creations. And this is a worker placement game, and it's hard to think of a bad worker placement game that Simone Luciani has been a part of. So right there, it's practically qualifying for the list. I like the art, which is this, of course, colorful anthropomorphic rats exploring this abandoned farmhouse, I believe it is, and the environs of the farm, and building up their little rat empire. It looks quite cute and at the same time very crunchy in terms of a worker placement game. It's got this, it sort of has worker movement, not exactly. I think it's kind of a rondelle that you put your workers on, or it's like you can put all your workers together and get a stronger action, but then then you're less flexible because you have to move to get the other actions, and you might not be able to get there to the action you want on the next turn, or you can spread them out, get to any action you want, but maybe your actions aren't quite as strong. So some interesting tensions there that I'm not sure we've really seen much of in worker placement games. I do have a little bit of a concern that there looks to be a fairly decent luck element in the game, because it also has a strong exploration element of opening a door and take what you get, or finding a new rat, and it has a power that you may or may not need. But maybe the theme will carry me through that, and maybe that won't be much of a big deal. Anyway, number 7 on my list, Rats of Wistar.
This is on my honorable mentions list, and it is there because it is a Luciani game, frankly. I mean, it looks like pretty basic worker placement with an engine builder about rats escaping a lab and building a home, as you said. But, it's got Luciani in it, so I'm sure there's some gold there. My number 7 has just been mentioned. It is Apiary by Connie Vogelman and published by Stonemaier Games. As I said before, Bees in Space. Tony kind of covered it all. I think that there is going to be something unique about that worker bumping mechanism, and it sounds like there's a hibernate mechanism, so perhaps you'll be stretching your rounds for as long as possible. Another mechanism which I greatly enjoy and which we've seen in other Stonemaier games such as Tapestry. And I think the uniqueness of the player boards, which are your hive ships, which have to be, as it appears, built around and which also hold resources and can be upgraded, that intrigues me. I like my bits of worker placement, and I like my bits of tile lane, and I'll take it. That is Apiary, Bees in Space, published by Stonemaier Games.
Great. Okay. Well, my number 6 is kind of my dark horse game of the list that I'm really glad that I found, and is also my third first-time designer on this list. Don't worry, more from here on out. We will be going with some old favorites, but this game is Art Society. designed by Mitch Wallace and published by Mighty Boards. And when I dived into the mechanisms of this game and I saw the title, I thought this must be a Knizia fan who's paying homage to modern art and high society, because it seems to have a little in common with both of those games. It's a art collecting auction game, like modern art, and like high society, you have limited tiles that you bid with, so you can't just bid the exact number of your currency. You have to bid that which actually matches the tiles that you have in front of you, right? But beyond just being an auction game, it's a spatial game as well. So you get the picture, which you buy via auction, and then you put it in your gallery, and it's going to score based on what it's next to and all these other spatial factors. And there's frames that you have to get, and the paintings and your gallery looks absolutely gorgeous at the end of the game, from what I can see. So I like auction games, even though we don't talk about them much on here, but I like it to be mixed in with something else, and I love spatial games. So I think this is a mix, a peanut butter and chocolate that I haven't seen before, and that looks really cool and has great graphic design, so I can't wait to try it. It looks like a pretty light game that you can play in under an hour, so that's Art Society.
Yeah, I saw this, read through the mechanisms, didn't grab me, closed the tab, but that's, again, why there are two of us here. My number 6 is Pirates of Maracaibo. By, of course, Alexander Pfister, but supplemented and designed by Ralph B. A.R.T. and Ryan Hendrickson, the guys who did Carthago and the guy who did Carthago and the guy who did the Orleans Roll and Write. They joined Pfister to reimagine Maracaibo as an avatar-driven sailing game with variable setup and a card-driven map. Basically, you're going to lay out about 20 cards representing the Caribbean with some regular islands blocking the way, and then you're racing again, moving 1 to 3 cards at a time and towards the home port. But you're racing here not just to the end of the map, but to the intermediate benefits that score more for being the first sometimes, and also you can interact with those spaces in multiple ways, one of which would be actually buying that space, that level 1 space, let's say, and doing the actions on it, or as well as getting the points on it for a set cost, and that card then gets replaced by a stronger level 2 card in its place. But you can also just interact with that space and get money that you can utilize at more costly sites later on. So it's a lot of sequencing of movements and reacting to other players' movements getting in the way of your plans. Sounds like combat is random dice rolls plus modifiers, which I am less jazzed about, but the special powers that you buy and put on your player ship and player board, which is your player ship, they sound cool, like the figureheads, which give you special powers, and that's good and fun theming. And there are several side mechanisms, like in the original Maracaibo, like exploration, that have been reimagined for this smaller game. So I want to give Pirates of Maracaibo a shot. I think it's a familiar set of aspects and theming of a game that have been reimagined for something smaller and quicker and quite a lot different. And frankly, I'd like to explore this one. That's Pirates of Maracaibo.
I'm glad you chose this one, Pat, because I didn't. I love Maracaibo to death. This one didn't quite grab me, maybe because I'm a little more suspicious of Pfister's lighter games, which I haven't enjoyed as much as his heavier titles. And there was nothing about it that made my heart race. The graphic design and the setup of the board and the dice combat, none of that really excited me, but it's a Pfister game, so it might be great. So I'm glad you will probably go out there and be the guinea pig for this game, and if it's great, then I can jump on board.
Happy to be the taste tester here.
So now we're moving into familiar territory, or at least familiar designers, I'm going to say. And I'm going to bet this appears higher on Pat's list. But for me, my number 5 most anticipated game is Evacuation by Vladimir Suhi and Delicious Games.
I see you're not done with Suhi yet.
I am not done with Suhi
Our last
yet.
review of Woodcraft, you were a little down on him.
I did not like Woodcraft. And Messina before that was merely okay to good as opposed to great, as his previous couple games had been. So the bloom is off the rose a little bit, but I note also that those 2 games were done with co-designers, and this is back to being an entirely Vladimir Suhi design, which I'm kind of fully on board with. What looks interesting about Evacuation, the theme is something we've seen before. In fact, we even talked about it in our environmental anxiety episode about this is an evacuation of Earth and moving to a new planet theme, right? But what looks really cool about this is that you start with this engine built on Earth that's producing things for you, and then you have to move along this track and move things over to the new planet, then pack up your engine or destroy your engine on Earth and start building a new engine on the new planet. So you've got things happening on the new planet in the old planet, and you need to juggle those. Apparently, it's very heavy and mind-bending. If there's a game, this game has an excellent chance of bringing Suhi right back up to the top for me.
I have nothing to say.
You will in a little bit, I predict. Anyway.
My number 5 is a game by designers that I've not played their games before. It's Kutna Hora by Andre Biersten and Peter Kaslaba and Pavel Jarosz. I'm sure I'm butchering, and published by CGE. A lot of my excitement about Kutna Hora, or the City of Silver, as it's alternatively known, comes from comments of those who have demoed or played it from the Discord. In this game, Kutna Hora, you'll be buying and selling things, but every resource that you obtain eventually is converted to money based on the current market price. And this current market price and the agency over it, it's sidled more or less into one player's agency to manage that market price. So it sounds like if other players have a lot of stone, for example, and you have some agency over the stone market, you could theoretically tank that price and make their efforts meaningless. Now, the key is that everything in this game eventually boils down to money one way or another, and that money is used to take actions, which require money. And the price of those actions is dictated by previous actions. Okay, that's clever. You've got something going on here. So I want to give this a shot. Kutna Hora, it sounds very interactive and mean in a way that Patrick likes. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, I looked at this one, and I learned a fair bit about it at Gen Con because Wolfram and Big John were up there at the CGE booth. It's the big CGE game of the year, and Wolfram was demoing it nonstop throughout the convention. He did say to me, "I don't think this is a Tony game. I don't think you're going to like this game." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, it's the kind of thing where you could have this great income, and then players just happen to take these couple of actions, and your income goes into the total toilet," which you sort of mentioned.
Yes, good. I like it.
And while I like to pretend I enjoy player interaction
Tony.
A ton, I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound wonderful for me. But there are interactive games I like, so I might enjoy it. It just seemed like it might not quite be my style, but we'll see.
Any chance to screw someone over is good with me.
So my number 4 game is another game that I'm pretty positive is going to be higher on Pat's list. It's my one exception about games that I saw at Gen Con. And I only saw a demo. I did not play it. If I'd played it, I probably wouldn't be anticipating it. Probably wouldn't have made this list. And Pat has spoken about this game at great length. It's called Nucleum. It's from Simone Luciani, a designer I adore, and David Turksey, a designer I don't adore. It would probably be the most frank way to put it. A game about building nuclear power plants and transitioning from coal energy to nuclear energy. And it has some barrage DNA in how you make connections and cut people off and build your engine and score points each round. I'm not going to talk about it more because I think Pat will have more to say in a little bit. That's
Great.
Nucleum, my number 4.
Okay, my number 4. We are returning to Evacuation by Vladimir Suhi, and this time published by his publishing company Delicious Games. Again, Tony mentioned it. You're going to be dismantling one economy and then rebuilding it on a new world. So engine deconstruction and engine building paired in one game. Very cool. And it's fun, this toggle of, at the start of the game, you're your strongest. But it takes this idea of shifting your engine, which you often do in games, often for points, but it inverts it, where you must use that pivotal moment of shifting your engine to create another completely unique engine, since many of the resources from one world, as I've learned, cannot be transferred to the next. So there's some classically conjoined Suhi here where you'll be able to add cards to your hand to use as additional actions on top of your main actions, but which also affect end-of-round bonuses. And I love that it's a race game where the player to start the economy on their new planet first wins. It's such a punch in the gut to all of the work that you've done on building one engine and building a second engine made up of all these resources, and then just to reduce it to the binary win-loss scenario condition. That's really funny and cruel. And I'm excited to see how it works. So Suhi sold. That is Evacuation.
Cool. Well, my number 3 is a game I really wish I'd played at Gen Con. spoiler, my number one game is a game I really wish I'd played at Gen Con as well. This is a game based on pedigree of similar games, which is why it's on the list. This is Age of Innovation, which is basically Terra Mystica through the roof, or Advanced Terra Mystica. It's not just a revised edition, but there's some massive changes to the game. Some people say Gaia Project was Terra Mystica through the roof, but this really keeps the fantasy theme, the fantasy world cut off with rivers and many of the core mechanisms. The graphic design in this one looks better. The cult tracks have a lot more interesting things in giving you income and not just power. The buildings and the factions have all been changed around. There's like 20 new factions. Your player board actually the faction doesn't determine everything. You can actually do things that sort of build out your faction and what its abilities are during the game. I don't completely understand this, but I'm very intrigued, and I love Terra Mystica and Gaia Project. I know that the people near me in New Jersey playing board games have tried this, and I'm jealous, and I'm mean to get them to get it back on the table with me there. If you love Gaia Project and Terra Mystica, this will be on your list. If those games are too heavy or not for you, then it won't be. So I don't expect to see Pat playing this game, but I'm very much looking forward to Age of Innovation.
I actually had a chance to play it last Saturday and was all looking forward to it. Alas, I had to study for the LSAT, so missed out on my moment for Age of Innovation. But modular Terra Mystica, okay, that's good. That's interesting, and I would try it, Tony.
Cool.
My number 3 game is Civolution by Stefan Feld and published by Deep Print Games. Yes, Feld does a civilization game with dice selection and a tech tree. I am in. I am a little worried about the phrases, quote, dice rolling and, quote, events included on the mechanism list, but I hope it will be fine. There's not much on this game yet, which is why it's not higher. I mean, 3 is high, but just the concept of Feld doing a civ game with a check tree is enough to excite me. But they will be presenting 2 prototypes at Essen with limited play space, frankly, so reserve your play space now with Deep Print Games if you are thinking about going to Essen. So, Civolution, looking forward to more.
This would have made my list. I saw this and was excited about it, even though there isn't much out there. But when I saw that, just because it's for demo only, if the game is for demo at Essen and then it comes out in November, I'll put it on my list. But this one looks like it's coming out sometime in 2024. Who knows? It might not even be out till next year's Essen. So for that reason, it seemed like, is this really a 2023 anticipated game? That's the only reason this did not make my list.
Fair enough.
So my number 2, I suspect this is going to be in Pat's number 1 or 2 slot, but we will see, is a game called Planta Nurbo. Nubo. Oh, I can't. Planta Nubo is exactly right. I cannot read my own handwriting, which is pretty sad.
I do want to hear about this game, Planta Nurbo, though.
Planta Nubo. Well, the fact that I assume that's new life, new earth, new plants, something like that in a European language. I'm demonstrating my ignorance here, Pat. But my lack of knowledge of even the title of the game shows that there isn't a ton out on this game, but I can tell you a few things which are amazing. The design trio that made the game this is like one of those super bands in the 70s or 80s, This has Michael Keller of Azul and Heaven and Ale and many other games with Wolfgang Kramer as one of the designers. It has Uwe Rosenberg, Feast for Odin, Agricola, and many others as a designer, and Andreas Ode Odendahl, who did La Granja and Cooper Island, another big heavy Euro. This has been described as a Feast for Odin-ish, maybe, in that it's got a big polyomino element. It's got, again, one of these futuristic nature themes. We're trying to save the environment by growing plants in the sky and then shipping them back to Earth. I don't quite understand it, but it looks like it's got some interesting things in how you build out the polyomino board on your own player area, but then you've got to clear it or have room for clouds for points or something afterwards. It's got some multiple considerations there, not just building out the polyomino board one time. It looks absolutely gorgeous, even though I understand nothing about what's going on the board. It looks like it's worker placement. I don't know a whole lot more than that, but I'm not sure that I need to. Based on pedigree, look, mechanisms alone, I'm really looking forward to Planta Nubo.
My mouth wants to talk about it, but for some reason I can't. I don't know why. My number 2 is Nucleum by Simone Luciani and David Turchi, and published by Board and Dice. I don't need to say much more about Nucleum. I've said a lot about it already on the last 2 episodes, and Tony just described it. Suffice to say, it's like a nicer barrage with tougher decisions to play for railroads, or using your tiles for placing above your board for income, build out onto the map for better sequencing of play, similar to brass, so that you've got better control over the nuclear sites and the coal industry and the various building sites, or to play them above your board and get kind of the optimal actions for them and be able to reuse them later. In this race against your enemies to the optimal sites, it creates quite a puzzle of how to string out your turns. And upon discovery, playing this game a few times, it does appear that it is advantageous to string out your turns for as long as possible from what I'm seeing so far. I'm playing it again tomorrow over Tabletop Simulator, so we'll see if I get further confirmation of that. But so far, I've enjoyed my games of Nucleum, and I'm excited to see the physical copy and play it only further.
Great. Well, my number one is a game. Can you guess what my number one is? I don't think you'll be able to guess my number one. I'll give you a hint, though. As I've gotten older, I wouldn't even say gotten older. Just in the last year or two, I feel like my tastes have changed towards lighter games, to be honest with you. It's not that I don't still enjoy heavy Euros, but I don't enjoy them exclusively as much as I used to. And in part, it's because of the stress of learning and going through those 30-page rule books. Sometimes I like to figure out something simpler, something that I know can get to the table. I love polyomino games.
Are you going to give me a chance to guess?
Yeah, I'll give you a chance in a second. I'm giving you more hints.
Wow.
More hints. I love polyomino games, but I'm still looking for that grail polyomino game that really is mostly a polyomino game, and it's just my favorite thing in the world. I mean, I love A Feast for Odin, but that's like a hybrid. So what's a mostly polyomino game that could be just a total hit for me, Pat, coming out this year?
I mean, total hit would imply design pedigree, and for that, I would take a look at Tangram City by Uwe Rosenberg, which is polyomino game, pure and simple, about creating large color blocks of yellow and red. But I don't know if you would have seen that one, so don't know if it's that. I would also... Nope, I don't know, Tony. Sock it to me.
World Wonders from Zé Mendez and Arcane Wonders. This is a polyomino game, and it's a polyomino game about building out your ancient buildings and building world wonders. And I can't deny that the toy factor is a part of this game, because there's like 30-something wonders in the box that you can build, and they are not the regular cardboard tiles that you're slapping on your personal player board. They are these big, multi-piece, wooden painted wonders that look pretty spectacular on the table. But beyond that, there's some really interesting things going on here. You can only place and take those wonders in relationships to other things on the board. Most games that have wonders, it's just they cost a ton of resources. That's not how it works here. It's you're building the wonders in relationship to other things on your board to fulfill those goals. And also, each round you have a certain amount of action points. I believe it's 7 action points. They're called coins, but they're really action points. And you can build a wonder anytime during your turn, but it costs you all your remaining action points to do so, right? So if you want to get that wonder that's out there, and there's always 3 on display, and then they refresh when somebody takes one. If you want to get that wonder that's out there, you can do it with your first move, but then you won't be doing anything else that round, right? And that's really neat, because it creates this whole tension and push your luck and interaction of like, I think I can take a couple action points to place these other polyomino pieces and still get that wonder, but then Pat takes it right as I'm about to take it, right? So it's like, how long can you push your luck and get the wonder you need? And if somebody takes a wonder, you may not be able to get another one because they may not fit depending on how you've built out your board. And there's tracks that you go up when you play various tiles that do your scoring and population, but it's those timing considerations which really, really look interesting to me. Also, buildings have to be built next to roads, and roads are something that you can buy. They're things that you can take each turn rather than the polyomino pieces. So there's these key things that everybody wants. Everybody wants that little polyomino piece. Everybody wants those wonders. Everybody wants those roads. There's a tower where you can start new roads. And each round there seems to be a lot of turn angst of people taking what you want each round, which isn't always there in a polyomino game, which just might focus in on the spatial puzzle. But I love the combination of those things with the spatial puzzle going on and the toy factor. So yeah, even though it's not a heavy game, that's my number one most anticipated game this year, World Wonders.
Yeah, this was 25th on my list. It looks like a My City board with the river running down the middle with the World Wonder meeples on top, and they are beautiful. There's quite an intense toy factor there. I like that idea of running out of gold, and so your turn is over. So any game where you're attempting to prolong your turn for as long as possible is very enjoyable, but tied to this push your luck factor of somebody else might build your wonder, and you have to look over at the other player's board to see what they're capable of. That is spicy. So that looks fun.
Okay, Pat, I'm going to guess you're number one. I'm going to guess it's not Planta Nurbo.
Close relative of Planta Nurbo.
Instead, it's
Planta Nubo by
yes.
Michael Keller II, Andreas Ode, and Andreas Ode, Odin Wall, and Uwe Rosenberg, yes, and published by the Game Builders. So, as you said, this is tile laying, engine building, and it's Uwe. I read through the description of this game on my flip phone, and I still found it interesting. I read through the designer diary of it. Tony, there's bonuses on the board, and you'll have to build on them. And then there's rocks that you have to clear to expand your space. You've got a grid of actions and polyominoes to play workers into. You're placing between two and activating one or both of them. That is a fun mechanism. You've got forests that you have to place onto your tile puzzle later that you'll have to include in your playing because you have to make space for them. That's clever long-term play. At the end of each round, you'll have one unused worker who gives you a bonus for what's on it. That feels very Terra Mystica, Gaia project in a way, working towards that end of round bonus. There's Euro-y things like income and track climbing and energy accumulation to use on special cards. That feels very Euro-y and fun. And you're playing these forests onto your grid of garden plots to fill holes to make it work. And it looks like tile laying, similar to a Feast for Odin, and the use two things scoring mechanism of Carpe Diem, but used as an action selection. This looks like it's a very interesting play, and it's quite heavier, it appears, on initial glance. There's a lot going on, and I want to explore it. That is Planta Nubo.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for drawing out more of the details of the game. And to be honest with you, Pat, I'm more sold by Michael Kiesling than I am by Uwe Rosenberg almost in this game, because Kiesling, I think, is the unquestioned master of tile-laying games, whether it's Azul or Heaven Nail. The thing is, he just rarely does on his own. He tends to do lighter games. So I love that he's doing a heavy game, and with Uwe Rosenberg and with Ode. And the graphic design also looks spectacular.
Tony, there's no Michael Kiesling on this game.
I thought it was Michael Kiesling.
It's Michael Keller.
Off the list.
Not a La Granja fan?
I thought Andreas Odendahl did La Granja.
They both did.
Michael Keller did it with him?
Yes. If you want to redo your 1 through 10, I'll give you a minute.
Okay, we're going to re-record the entire episode right now. Pat, you're going to have to rearrange your day.
I don't need to go to law school. It's fine.
Admit it. If this had been... Okay, I'm looking at Michael Keller. We did Agra. Okay, this is somewhat embarrassing. But it still would have made my list. It might not have been number 2. Admit it, it would have been even higher than number 1 on your list if it had been Michael Kiesling.
It would have, yeah. I was like, Michael Kiesling did this? Oh my God, what?
It's funny because I wrote down Michael Keller, and I think I said Michael Keller when I did my number 2.
Yeah.
But I was thinking Michael Kiesling. I
think Michael Kiesling and Uwe on a game together is literally unbelievable, which is why I caught this. It's too good to be true.
That would be too good to be true. I'm both embarrassed and sad, Pat. But still looks like a good game, though. Still. Don't get off the train, everybody.
Honorable mentions.
Don't allow my foolishness to discourage you. Planto.
Nurbo.
I'm having trouble with words today. What can I say?
Is that
Maybe they'll do a Planta Nurbo that's by Michael Kiesling and Uwe Rosenberg.
Yeah, the redesign.
Yeah.
Take 2.
What do you got for honorable mentions, Pat?
Tony, Patterns, a mandala game by Trevor Benjamin and Brett J. Gilbert and published by Lookout Games. We loved Mandala, the 2-player duel game where you're playing into beautiful T-mat onto 2 different mandalas and vying for control of them. And that was tricksy in its scoring where based off of which card scored first for you. They would go into their first occurrence of one of 6 colors would go into a score multiplier, and the ones that came first would be in the ×1 multiplier, and the ones that came last would be in the ×6 multiplier. But the game also ended instantly, and so you might not even get to the ×6 multiplier if the other player does first. So it was a tricksy game of trying to attempt to slot in earlier colors for stepping stones all the way to the 6 multiplier, while also trying to focus on actually bagging some scoring into your scoring pot to be multiplied at the end of the game.
Which was the title of this game?
Now, this game is that same scoring mechanism, but now in a game called Patterns, a mandala game. And the gameplay is different in that you will be taking turns swapping tiles from a large mandala to mark a continuous color of areas as their territory. It's a big team map again, and it's 2-player. From a brief video in German that I watched, it does have that ×1 to ×6 multiplier for scoring again. I'm hoping that it's going to be as good as the original mandala, given it borrows some of those same scoring mechanisms with a new core gameplay.
Okay, I missed this one. Well, I'm going to cheat and throw like 6 honorable mentions at once.
Oh, are they all Reiner Knizios or something?
No.
Okay.
They're just all the games that were on my anticipated games of Essen list. I just wanted to list them off.
Yep.
Arborea, a huge, colorful Eurogame. Septima, a weird game about witches. The White Castle, the latest De Vere release.
Good.
Would have been on this list probably had they not been on the first list.
Okay, good. Another one for me is The Hunt by Matthias Kramer and Engine Kramer, who I believe is Matthias Kramer's relative, maybe their child, and published by Salt and Pepper Games. This is a WW2 asymmetric card game where one of you plays the head of the German Kriegsmarine, where you're sinking merchant ships, and the other player plays the British fleet, trying to hunt down those submarines. And both sides have asymmetric decks, and the Brits win if they battle the Germans and do more damage to the Kriegsmarine fleet, while the Germans win if they stay hidden and sink 5 ships, crippling the British war economy. And I'm not one for deduction, Tony, but this theme and the action mechanism could work for me. That is The Hunt.
Okay, my next cheating version of an honorable mention is to say Forest Shuffle and 3 Ring Circus, games we covered before and that I played at Gen Con and that you should definitely check out if you're at Essen, if you haven't already.
Great. Another one for me, more historical. It's Weimar, the Fight for Democracy. Again, it's Matthias Kramer, and this time Capstone Games. Yay, we're fighting to retain the Weimar Republic. It's the socialists and conservatives against the communists and nationalists on 2 battlefields, and it is action points plus events on cards, coupled as they are in Twilight Struggle and Watergate. It appears to be a recreation of that central mechanism in a new setting, and I'm for it. That is Weimar, the Fight for Democracy.
Another one I have is Kutna Hora, which you mentioned already, and I already mentioned that one, so I'm going to sneak in another one here, and that is Sky Team, a game that was at Gen Con that we may have briefly mentioned, but only didn't make my list because it's not my style of game. This 2-player cooperative game about landing a plane together under disastrous circumstances, like bad things happen and you don't get to speak. It's dice rolling and placing dice which raise the flaps and do the things, and hopefully you're not causing disaster by contradicting each other on what you're doing. You're playing the pilot and co-pilot of a plane that hopefully doesn't go down. Looks interesting. Again, not quite my style of game. It's gotten a lot of buzz, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to love it.
Cool. Another one for me, I think we're curious about De Vere Games, and Bamboo by Herman P. Milan is going to be, I don't know if it's available, but it is at least demoable at Essen. Bamboo, you're growing your bamboo forest and ensuring your family's success while bidding for points at the end of each round in an offering. You're building your family's home as well as feeding them, and it looks like a crunchy little Euro, and I've enjoyed Milan's design etiquette previously, so I think I at least want to give this one a shot. That's Bamboo.
I think Bamboos may have been out for a while, which is the only reason I didn't put it down here in this category, but maybe it's just coming to the U.S. I'm not sure. Anyway, looks interesting. Pampero, a game I think mentioned briefly that I saw at Gen Con but did not play, about building out wind farms, big, heavy, chunky Euro. It kind of made me sleepy to look at the rule book, but it's a gorgeous, gorgeous big game. I would love for somebody else to buy it and teach me the rules, and then I would love to play it.
Same. Another one from me, Books of Time by Philip Glowix, and published by Board and Dice. Board and Dice, they release some reliably dry Euros that I enjoy playing, Tekhenu and Tabannusi, etc. And Philip Glowix is in the background of a lot of these, following games with expansions or re-implementing other games like Teotihuacan and Two Founders of Teotihuacan, or the expansion to Tekhenu. Here in Books of Time, you're arranging a tableau builder, but the twist is that you're building it into an actual book with a little binding, with flippable pages and all. And each page has special abilities and attributes that will contribute to your book, and it looks like a nice twist on tableau building, which some of my favorite games are tableau builders. I'm generally a fan, and this looks like a nice twist that I want to try. That is Books of Time.
What's the title of that again?
Books of Time by Board and Dice.
My next honorable mention is Neotopia, also from Arcane Wonders. This is a light spatial puzzle game, of which I tend to love. And this one has amazing tiles a la Azul, beautiful, colorful tiles that you kind of want to bounce up and down and click them together. And what you're doing in this game is you're putting different colored tiles next to each other to fulfill pattern cards based on the what colors are in what places, and then score them. A little bit like, it sounds a little bit like Reef in that you're doing that, but whereas in Reef, the twist is you're building upwards as well as outwards. In Neotopia, the twist is you're actually playing in a common board space. So you could be building towards something and then somebody else takes it in a different direction, or they build something which now you can adapt to. It looks kind of cool. My two reservations are, one, that looks like it could be some effective randomness that could be frustrating when people build out what you're doing in a weird way. And also, it looks like a pretty standard, simple game. You play them out and then you score them. You know what I mean? Anyway, I'm still sure that I would enjoy it at least somewhat. That's Neotopia from Arcane Wonders.
Okay, one that caught my eye not for its theme, but for its mechanisms is Artemis Project by Serge Leggett and Bruno Faiduti, published by Grand Gamers Guild. So you're a bunch of space explorers and colonists discovering planets and building blah, 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 blah. The interesting thing here is that all players are performing hidden action sequencing on a shared board, and they're vying for activation spaces earlier or later in the round, and where actions affect one another. So it's all done in reading order, so you're fighting to string together useful actions while playing those that you know will benefit you most and your opponents the least based on the information that you currently have at that time. This may get completely screwed up by what your opponents end up playing and how they sequence their plays in between yours. So you have to be playing in their heads to a certain degree in order to play well. That sounds clever, and it's done by one of the guys that did Nidavellir and Mystery of the Abbey, Serge Leggett, so it should be interesting. That is Artemis Project.
So my next one is Zoo Tycoon, which, to be honest, I didn't look too carefully at, but looked like it had some cool things about, getting animals and crunchy economic things and building animals. It looked like New York Zoo, except more complicated. I'm kind of ambivalent about zoos, and the game looks like it might be a bit hairy and sloppy, which kind of kept it off the list. But still, there's those nice, cool animals and lots of crunchy stuff going on that could be good. It could be good. It might not be, but it could be.
Call me curious. Another one for me, I've sort of mentioned it already, that's Tangram City by Uwe Rosenberg and published by Korea Board Games Company. This looks better than it sounds, because it sounds like not a game. You're laying out tiles with red and green on them, and you want to keep red and green balanced. That's the game. You just want to have red squares and green squares and have them cancel each other out to zero. The twist is that the tiles themselves are all sorts of messed up shapes. You're going to have some that look like L's, some that are cut exactly in half, where the squares end up being triangles, and where there's enormous chunks of red and green. It sounds like I just took a WAIS test, a WAIS intelligence test for my wife and for her schooling, and it sounds almost exactly like some of the intelligence tests that they have, and as far as the spatial planning and matrix reasoning aspects of that particular intelligence test. And this one sounds a lot trickier than it actually initially appears upon first blush. And I would encourage you all to look at photos of Tangram City, because I think that this could really be a brain burner with how simple the concept is.
Cool. Well, my next honorable mention is Bonsai, a light spatial puzzle about each player building out their own bonsai tree. I like what was going on when I saw it being played and how your branches twist around and how you have to manage your resources and manage the direction of how your tree was spreading. It falls into those pleasant, light, spatial puzzles that I always tend to enjoy. If you want to know more about this game, check out our last episode, or actually, I shouldn't say our last episode, our 2 episodes ago during our Gen Con review when Jonathan Gortat went into a good deal of detail in playing it. Sadly, I couldn't get a demo table. He did, and he has some nice things to say about it as well. That's Bonsai.
Okay, another one for me is Emerge by Adam de Jong, and it is a Pandasaurus Games game. This is a dice rolling game, which no, it does not grab me at first, but the theme grabs me. It is underwater volcanoes emerging from the water and slowly growing layers of lava that hardens into rock, which is covered by grass and which animals eventually thrive. And as the islands grow taller, they allow for more complex ecosystems to thrive there. So you're rolling and locking dice to commit research and grab points and endgame tiles. Emerge looks beautiful with lots of animeeples included, and Pandasaurus is publishing, so I think this one is at least worth a try. That is Emerge.
Cool. Yeah, I saw that at Gen Con, and if I had more time, I might have demoed that one. My next game is a weird one for me. It's a honorable mention, not because I'm particularly excited about this game, but a lot of well-known reviewers are absolutely in love with this game. And this is could be a dark horse that emerges for some people. It's a game called Evenfall, which is a tableau building game with some funky, weird, dark fantasy art that wasn't really that appealing to me, but other people seem to love. And it had this sort of, combo-rific and moving cards from your outer circle to your inner circle to be able to engage more workers, and it combined tableau building and worker placement in this weird way. And there was some cool mechanisms. I just couldn't get myself excited about it, but I'm not going to name them, but 3 famous reviewers are this game is absolutely amazing recently, even though it's from a small publisher. And who knows, maybe it is, and maybe we'll be turned on to it one day. So that's Evenfall.
Yeah, some of the Discord folks were excited about that too, and I don't really get it, but I'll keep my eye out on it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you.
So my next one is Kelp. This is a game by Carl Robinson and Wonderbow Games, but it's really a game by the documentarian who filmed My Octopus Teacher, because this is about an octopus who hides from sharks in a kelp forest, and it does so by turning into a rock, and it walks around, and it squeezes into cracks, and generally fools the sharks trying to sniff her out. Carl Robinson saw this movie and said, "That's a game, isn't it? This octopus is definitely playing a game." It's a hidden movement game, 1v1 hidden movement game, and I'm usually not one for those, but Kelp reenacts this whole battle between an octopus and a shark, where the octopus is using, a buildable deck to outmaneuver the sharks, which are using dice rolls and mitigation to try and find and eat it. I would give this one a shot, even though it's not my usual cup of tea. I would take a bite out of this one, and that's Kelp.
Cool. Well, my next game is a little bit hard to pronounce. I keep wanting to call it Ameristar, but it's actually Amristar, a chunky, heavy worker placement, I think, game from Europe. And I was starting to get into it, and then I was like, wow, there's so many games like this.
Right.
That I'm excited.
Exactly. No, my thoughts exactly. And this designer doesn't have they don't have much of a pedigree, so one to watch, but maybe not one to leap at. Yeah.
Yeah, this is one to jump into if somebody else gets to the table, but it looks beautiful on the table.
Right.
And it's got these wonderful elephants walking all over the place. I just want those elephants.
Right.
Amristar looks gorgeous. I've heard some good things. It's apparently very chunky and replayable, but I couldn't quite find out enough to distinguish it to make it burst through that group of heavy Euros.
Rebuilding the central golden temple of the Sikh Empire, you're pairing classic Mancala gameplay with a wandering elephant to get 1 to 3 actions, depending on how well you pair them up, such as mining stone or improving your player board or donating to the temple. I'll watch it, but I'm not leaping at it.
Exactly.
2 more from me, Tony. Stressbotics by Fernando Barbanage and published by Two Tomato Games, but really this one sounds like it was designed by 4chan. You're using robots to mine exoplanets, and you have several beta bots, i.e. cucks, which do a lot of the work for you, but get stressed out by doing the work. Then you have alpha bots, i.e. chads, which have a short temper and around which the beta bots like to gather and surround. And you clear your way through chambers using these beta bots to get the alpha bot to the final chamber. But your beta bots get stressed out the farther they end up from the alpha bot, reducing their carrying capacity and action abilities in the next round. So that is Stressbotics, a game of cucks and chads.
I might pass on that one. My next game is called Sea Dragons, and made it as an honorable mention because Simone Luciani was a co-designer.
Same. That was my last one, so we can just talk about that.
We can talk about this together. Yeah, it's a cool-looking game on the table, too. It has the head of a dragon and then the little bumps of the sea dragon floating around, and you're trying to steer them to both fulfill pattern cards and eat little pirates on the board and fulfill goals and, I guess, cut off other people's dragons. I didn't quite get it, but it looks very nice on the table. It looks like it was maybe a little too simple to make it onto my list, but...
Kind of a
still looks like it would be a fun family
feel.
game to try. What?
Kind of a classic game feel of kind of area control and expanding out. And, as I understand it, building out your dragons helps you gather treasures and sink ships. But then if you place next to your opponents, then they will get rewarded. So it's about managing your growth while avoiding assisting your opponents. But honestly, the main appeal for me here is Simone Luciani.
And the look of those sea dragons.
Sure.
I got one more, Pat.
Okay.
And this is a game I think we mentioned briefly that we tried to get to the table after hours at Gen Con and didn't. And this is Barcelona. It's from Danny Garcia, who's the same designer as Arborea, which is, I think, my most anticipated game of 2023.
It is. I just re-listened to that episode.
Barcelona is a worker placement game where you place your workers at intersections in the city and you get the action of the vertical road that you're on and the horizontal road that you're on. And then you build at the blocks around those intersections, you build buildings in those things and attract tenants to those buildings. Apparently the designer's actually from Barcelona and is very passionate about this. This gave me when we learned much of the rules and I watched playthroughs, because we almost played it, if we had a little more energy at Gen Con, it gave me big Lacerda vibes and Lisboa vibes in particular, those intersecting roads and clearing stuff off, although you're not clearing stuff off in Barcelona. And it looked beautiful, it looked kind of cool, and it kind of just made me a little sleepy to think about playing it, which is the only reason it didn't get played or get into the top 10 on my list. Still looks like an excellent game, and again, falls into that category of games that are honorable mentions here that I would love to try if somebody else owns the game and would teach it to me.
Same exact camp, it's on my on-to-try list, not on my want-to-buy list. So, Tony, I think that about wraps up our Essen preview and what we're excited for. That should give you about 50 games to take a look at and to get excited about. So, for those who are going to Essen, good luck. I hope that you get some demos in. And for those who are not, if anybody wants to try these games out, the ones that are on Tabletop Simulator, I'm down. And I know some of the other individuals on the Discord are as well. So,
I'd love to hear on the Discord about what other games that you're anticipating seeing coming out in the next month at Essen. So that link will be in the show notes.
Check that out in the show notes. Also, if you want to write us, we're at twowoodforwheat@gmail.com. And also check out Tony's blog. He's at Max Longstreet, The Secrets of Great Games. As far as the next episode, I believe it is, as we have said, our final episode of regular Two Wood for a Wheat programming. So do not miss it. We likely will come back here and there with some episodes about things that we're excited for, and maybe some end of the year lists. But as it stands, our last episode of regular programming. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm excited for it and looking forward to share that with you and the experience of this podcast with you folks. As usual, folks, thanks for listening and stay frosty.
Thanks for listening, folks.
Two Wood for a Wheat is recorded across the airwaves in Bear Creek, Pennsylvania, and Chicago, Illinois. We're produced by Tony Faber and edited by Patrick Flannery. Follow us on Instagram at TWFAW and find more episodes and blog posts at twowoodforawheat.com.
Yeah, I've been put on nortriptyline for a damaged laryngeal nerve, which is probably the result of 20 years of acid reflux.
That doesn't sound like a good party drug. Oh, yeah,
I'm
I'm tripping on ecstasy. What are you on? Oh, yeah, nortriptyline.